This is going to be a controversial video. I'm definitely going to have some hot takes, and probably 50% of you are going to disagree with me. But that's okay. I can already hear the 50% that is going to disagree with me is, oh boy, here goes Reloading Weatherby again, talking about velocity, and how it's better than accuracy. Well, yeah, I think I am. And before we dive into this, let's get the caveat out of the way. This video is not really for those that are just going to be shooting factory ammo. I mean, if you're fine with shooting factory ammo that was never really intended for short barrel magnums, that it's not an ideal powder, then sure, it doesn't really matter. Plus, if you're going to be shooting 400 yards and in, yeah, it doesn't really matter. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of why having a gun with a longer barrel, especially in a magnum, is pretty important. Speaking of factory ammo, these two powders, and I'm 98% sure that these are the powders that Hornady is using for 300 PRC, 7 PRC. I'm very confident this is the replacement powder of Reloader 26 for the 7 PRC, Stay-Ball HD and H1000. H1000 is an awesome powder. However, I think it's a little too slow burning for the 7 PRC. And Stay-Ball HD is even worse. Personally, I've never had good success hand loading with Stay-Ball HD. This powder is way too slow for most magnums. So what do I mean is just way too slow? It's not an ideal powder. Well, that is especially the case with 20, 22-inch barrels. So that's what we're going to talk about, is finding the ideal powder for your cartridge and your barrel length, and why overall for the average shooter, it's just dumb to get a Magnum and putting it in a 20-inch barrel. Let's just talk real quick about the main reason why people are getting Magnums in 22 inches and, heaven forbid, 20-inch barrels. It really has to do with putting a suppressor on it and not making it extremely long, which I can kind of understand, and no doubt suppressors are awesome. I hope to get one someday, but it just doesn't really make sense logically for me. So what do I mean? Well, you're basically turning, let's say, a 6.8 Western into a even less powerful than a 270 Winchester. You're turning your 7 PRC into a 280 Remington or a hot version of a 7mm 08. It just doesn't make sense. You're burning so much powder for mediocre performance. And if you're not a hand loader, you're paying, I don't know, $10 to $15 more box to the same performance as a 7mm 08. Now, I want to give an example here. Now, in GRT, I put in 270 WSM. Really, ideally, I would like to put in 6.8 Western, with the 6.8 Western being newer, and GRT not having 6.8 Western. We're just going to use 270 WSM. It is the parent case. So let's start off with a 26-inch barrel in the 270 WSM. We are going to make an assumption that it's a faster twist 270 WSM. We are going to use a 170 grain Berger EOL. And then we're going to use H1000. I don't think this is the ideal powder for 270 WSM or 6.8 Western, but we're going to use it anyway. And according to GRT, with that longer barrel, we are getting very good velocities with a 170 grain, 3,045 feet per second, while still staying under 65,000 PSI. One important thing I really want to talk about is burnt propellant. You really want to be at 100%. We'll get into that more, but bare minimum, you want to be 100%. What happens now, though, when we jump down to a 20-inch barrel? Let's see. Okay. You have lost over 200 feet per second, and your burnt propellant is now 99.4%. You have basically turned your 6.8 Western or 270 WSM into a 270 Winchester. Now, I could give other examples. one that's been done by Backfire is 6.5 PRC with a 20-inch barrel is basically a 6.5 Creedmoor, which that one really doesn't make sense because you're paying a bit more money to shoot 6.5 PRC for 6.5 Creedmoor performance. Now, before I get into why does it even matter, who cares if I'm 200 feet per second slower, I want to talk about why it's important to pick the correct powder for the cartridge and more specifically the barrel length. So we're looking at Hodgdon H4831SC, which I think is one of the most ideal powders for a short magnum like the 270 WSM, or really what we're pretending to look at is the 6.8 Western. And anyone that's loaded for 6.8 Western is going to tell you H4831SC just works. You're going to get, on average, better groups than you could with H1000. So I wonder why. With the 26-inch barrel, we're getting a little bit slower velocity. So we're about 75 feet per second slower than H1000. We get a 100% burn rate. But what happens when we go to a really short barrel with H4831? Yeah, we are dipping quite a bit in velocity, which I still don't think is ideal, but at least you get a 100% burn rate. And maybe I can't prove it, but I do think getting a 100% burn rate is going to improve your accuracy. And that, I think, is especially the case when you take it out to further distances. There is a program out there called Applied Ballistics. It basically maps out, shows your hit probability at certain yardage with the bullet you type in, the velocity and all of that. And what it basically tells you is velocity absolutely matters, especially for the novice, the beginner, or the intermediate shooter that maybe doesn't have wind calling down very well. I'm not going to go into depth about Applied Ballistics. I'd highly recommend you check out Little Crow Gunworks videos on it. He's the real expert on that stuff, not me. But basically, you're shooting the exact same groups from a 20-inch barrel and the 26-inch barrel. You are going to have like a 15 to 20% advantage when you're past 600 yards. And that percentage is even going to grow more as you go out farther, of hitting where you want it to hit simply by having it go faster. I mean, logically speaking, if you're shooting the same bullet and it's the same accuracy, but it's going 200, maybe 300 feet per second faster, there's less time for it to get there, and it's going to deflect the wind better. So yeah, of course, you're going to shoot a little bit better if it's faster. Now bear with me, I'm going to make a kind of a weird comparison, but we're going to do it anyway. Okay. If I asked all of you on my channel, what cartridge do you think is going to be easier and more consistent to hit a plate, a metal target at 1,000 yards? The 6.5 Creedmoor or a 28 Nosler? I would think a lot of you are going to vote 6.5 Creedmoor, because it has really good high BC bullets, such mild recoil. While on the other hand, you got this 28 Nosler that's going to be an absolute beast to shoot, and let's be honest, it's not going to shoot tight as groups as the 6.5 Creedmoor, at least at 100 yards. However, my real world experience has just been the exact opposite. Now, as long as you aren't scared to death of the recoil of a 28 Nosler and you're not going to flinch like crazy, it's just going to shoot better at longer distance than a 6.5 Creedmoor, despite all the recoil and maybe not even be able to spot your misses. For example, we're going to use this 175 grain AccuBond long range, and honestly, this is one of the smallest groups I've gotten in the 28 Nosler. It's a hard cartridge to get accurate, especially in a light hunting rifle. But even with groups that are kind of meh at 100 yards, with this going almost 3,200 feet per second, it absolutely smokes a 6.5 Creedmoor that's printing half MOA groups. Okay, I understand that's a very drastic comparison, but the point I'm trying to make is, unless you are a very experienced or even an expert shooter, velocity is going to help you out so much. And even for the expert shooters, they're still looking for as much velocity as possible. Take F-class shooters or PRS shooters, they're putting their guns in 26 to 30 inch barrels because they want to get as much velocity out of their efficient cartridge. Now let me just say this. I have friends, I watch YouTube channels that I really respect and enjoy. They use Magnums with really short barrels. Do I think they're just really stupid? No. If that's what they want to do, then go for it. What I guess the point of my video is I want to bring to light of the advantages of getting a 26-inch barrel. Not only in getting the most out of what you're paying for that ammo, but also you're going to increase your likelihood of hitting whether it's targets or animals at further distances.
28 Nosler. Wow. Oh yeah.